Here we go then. So we're going to spend a very short time, 10 or 15 minutes, on terminology services. Then we'll have a short break, and then we'll look at setting up a terminology server and then get into the data science exercise. So my aim in this 10 or 15 minutes is really to give you enough understanding of terminology services so that you can, if you choose to set up Snowstorm, that you can use it to run SNOMED queries or whatever else. And in the exercise, I'll show some example Python scripts that actually use the terminology services and Snowstorm specifically to run queries and find correlations against data. So yeah, this lot is all tied together. I've got a feeling this is a long presentation. I need to choose the good bits. Okay, so we've already seen ECL, of course, and we talked about some of the use cases. And one of the strong use cases is, of course, data analytics. And ECL allows you to define sets of interesting concepts. I think part of the power of SNOMED is that you can define sets of concepts, quickly and easily, without too much, time and expertise going into it. Once you get used to saying all descendants of some concept, and that should speed up your data analytics processes, because you're already spending a lot of time preparing the data, but you shouldn't have to spend a lot of time creating the sets of codes that you're interested in. So why use terminology services at all? So if we're thinking about data input and the clinicians recording the data, the search algorithms they use to find the relevant concepts are really key, that they work quickly and efficiently so that we end up getting high quality data to work with. So terminology services are a way to provide high quality search algorithms and good terminology binding. They can also support the navigation of SNOMED, and of course they can support running queries in a standardized way. And if terminology is updated frequently, for example, the international edition is updated every month, then you probably want a really efficient process for updating the terminology. And again, terminology services can provide that. So terminology services is like the general term, but really we're talking about a terminology server, like Snowstorm or OntoServer or SnowRay or something else. I know you have a national terminology server here in France as well. So this is the kind of architecture we recommend, where there's a national release center, and there may be a national terminology server that sits up here and allows you to fetch, the latest set of content. Or it could allow you to run a query to create a subset of codes that you're going to reuse many times. But if you're doing many queries to the terminology server, for example, for data entry, or maybe you've got like a data pipeline that does validation, then you probably want a local terminology server so that the national one isn't overwhelmed. So this is the sort of architecture we suggest. The national one is really used to distribute the content, and the local ones are used for lots of querying. So we use a standard in our terminology services API called HL7 FHIR, and that allows some flexibility. It simplifies the integration between your systems and the terminology server, because there's kind of standard libraries in most programming languages to make queries using FHIR to terminology services. And it also prevents vendor lock-in if we're using the FHIR standard, because you should be able to swap between different terminology servers and you should still get the same answer. You shouldn't have to change your client code. I'm going to whiz through this. You may already be familiar with FHIR. There's a module in FHIR that talks about terminology. There's other modules for capturing the actual clinical data, of course. But within the terminology module, there's 3 main resources that we use. There's the code system. So that's a version of SNOMED. It could be a specific version of the international edition. It could be the first version of the French version of SNOMED, which will be published later this month. Or it could be something else. It could be LINC or ICD or something else. But it's a version of a specific terminology. The second thing is value sets. So these are like sets of codes, sets of concepts for some specific purpose. And we've got maps as well to convert between different code systems. And for each resource type, there's operations or functions. So for a code system, we can look up, I've got this code, give me all the details for that code. We can also validate that a code is within this code system, that you could use to check for some data quality checks. There's a subsumption test. We can say, is this code a type of substance, for example? You can check if it's a subtype of this. This is like a standard way. It's something that ECL could do, but this is even more standardized. It's actually part of the FHIR API. So the value set resource has 2 operations. We can expand the value set. That means give me all the concepts or all the codes in the set. We can also, this expand one's really powerful, and it's how we run ECL actually. We'll see in the example. But we can also search within the set of codes, and that can be used for data entry, for example. And it's how our query builders work. And we can validate that a code is within a certain set. And finally, the concept map only has 1 operation. You can translate from one code to another code system. You of course need to have a mapping that's published into your terminology server for that to work. All right, so this is about how to list what's in your terminology server. What code systems are in there. We do a HTTP GET request. It's a basic API request to list them. This is how we run the operations. Again, it's a GET request. We say code system, and then we use this funny dollar lookup. That's the name of the operation. And then we give various parameters. And these are all documented in the HL7 FHIR documentation. We've got the lookup operation here and all the parameters that could be used. But essentially, when we do a lookup, we have to say what code we're trying to look up, some concept ID or maybe some LINC ID. We have to say the system, like what code system are we talking about? Maybe SNOMED, maybe something else. We can say the version. We can say, oh, only give me the June version of SNOMED CT in France. And we'll make sure we look up all the details of that code as it was published in the June version. There's various parameters. But what we're most interested in today for running our queries, I'm going to skip these. I'm going to skip these as well. What we're most interested in is the value sets where we can actually run ECL queries. Here's our first example. No, it doesn't. Here's our first example. So we can do a GET request to the terminology server with /value set /expand. And that means give me all the codes for some value set. But the nice thing about SNOMED is the value set doesn't have to exist. It could be the result of a query. For example, this query requests, this bit's not necessary, I'm going to leave it for this example. We're saying, give me the value set of concepts within SNOMED that match this ECL statement, inflammatory disorder. So what that will do is it will fetch all the inflammatory disorder concepts. But we can also do a filter if we want. We can also filter them by the text string year. Let's run that one now, just to see what happens. I'm going to open the snowstorm the international demo version of Snowstorm. I'll send the link in a minute. It's not for production use, but it's fine for like education and lightweight traffic. So I've got the terminology server, the base of the API. I've got /value set, $expand, and then I've got the definition of the subset, which is ECL query. I've got too many spaces in here. I'm trying to edit it out. I'm also filtering by ear. Let's see what we get. Okay, so we've got a response. The terminology server has written back to say this version of SNOMED CT is being used. I know that this is the international version because it's, I recognize the identifier, and this is like the date stamp of when it was published. And then we've got a list of concepts. They're all inflammatory disorders, and they've got some description which contains the word ear. You'll notice that the top one, this preferred term, doesn't contain the word ear, but this concept will have another description with ear on it. So that's our first terminology services query. I'll paste it in the chat for you if I can find the chat. And I think I need to wrap up, and we're going to take a 10-minute break in a moment before the Snowstorm light setup. I'm just seeing if there's any other really high quality stuff here to show you in the slides. We're talking about searching with multiple prefixes so that we don't have to write out the whole term. Or most terminology services with SNOMED support writing the prefix to many words to be able to search more efficiently. And that works both in the SNOMED browser here when you search, but also when you're using the filter parameter here. This multiple prefix search is a good idea. For example, if we were looking for blood oxygen pressure within reference range, we could just type blood ox within. The last thing was about mapping, and there's an example map, and there's also an example terminology services request of how to map between SNOMED CT and ICD-10. Okay, I'm going to wrap up there.